Welcome to episode 46 of Real Health Radio. You can find the links that I talk about as part of this episode at the show notes, which is www.7, all spelled out, so SEVEN health.com/46.
Welcome to Real Health Radio. Health advice that's more than just about how you look. And here's your host, Chris Sandel.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another installment of Real Health Radio. I'm your host, Chris Sandel, and for this week's show, I am back with another guest, and my guest today is Anne-Sophie Reinhardt. Anne-Sophie serves entrepreneurs, coaches, and highly ambitious women who want out of their destructive relationship with food and their bodies by helping them to respect their body wholeheartedly. She is a certified Martha Beck life coach and eating psychology coach, the founder of the award-winning blog and podcast Escape Diet Prison, a successful speaker and workshop leader with clients all over the world. And after a 14-year-long battle with food and her body, she successfully healed her relationship with herself and is now passionate about helping others find the peace, freedom, and happiness that she enjoys every day. An expert in the field, she's been quoted extensively on popular media and is a regular speaker on issues surrounding women's body image. So I first became aware of Anne-Sophie about a year ago through her podcast. I then started following her blog and really enjoyed her style of writing and just the level of honesty that she would be sharing about her life. And I've previously had Andrea Owen, on the podcast before, and I've really felt the same way about her, like someone who is open about the messiness of what life and a lot of the human experience is, and just using these stories and what people have gone through and what they've gone through to help others. So Anne-Sophie has been through a lot. I mean, struggling with anorexia for 14 years after developing that disorder at age 10. And the statistics for those who develop an disorder at this age, who then keep it up for such a long time and then actually make it out the other side, like they aren't great. And I don't have the actual percentages on it, but I'd be surprised if we're out of the single digits. So to be able to talk to Anne-Sophie about her experience and how she recovered, was a real honor. And just like with her blog, she was very honest about everything that she went through. So I really thoroughly enjoy recording this episode, and Anne-Sophie made it really easy, really great conversationalist. And yeah, I was just really enjoy what we had to say. So without me further rambling on, let's get on with the show. Anne-Sophie, welcome to Real Health Radio. It's a pleasure to have you join me.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be on this podcast and to be talking with you today, Chris.
Perfect. So I'd like to ask you the question that I start with pretty much all my guests, which is, for those who don't know about you, why don't you explain a bit about your background and how you got into the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, that's a long story. I'll try to keep it short. So I struggled with an eating disorder for 14 years of my life. I had anorexia, and then I went into the more, the binge eating stuff, and I did some purging here and there. But mostly it was anorexia. And it started when I was 10 years old. I started a diet, and then, slowly I got worse and worse and worse, and really got all this very positive reinforcement that I was, doing so great, and I looked so good, and I had lost so much weight. And it really quickly turned into severe anorexia. And at that time, really nobody noticed what was going on. My dad's actually a doctor, but they couldn't really see it. My family couldn't really see it. And I was suffering, and I isolated myself, and I was just really lonely, scared, and hungry all the time, right?
Yeah.
So my entire youth was literally spent dieting, over-exercising, and I lost all of my friends, and I just became this very depressed, sad young woman who had, before, I was full of life, I was very creative, and I was, just always out and with friends, right? And it really changed me. So I struggled with that for 14 years, and then I got married really early and really quickly, and I thought, here's my savior. Here's the guy.
At what age did that happen?
I was 24.
Okay.
I think I was 23 and I turned 24 a month later. And we got married after 6 weeks. So it was crazy. And so, I really thought he was going to heal me. But he didn't. Well, surprise, right? And instead I got worse. And so I decided I need help. I decided, something's not right here. So I've got something. And, I never really heard of other people struggle with anorexia at this point. Growing up in Germany, it wasn't really talked about. It wasn't a thing, right? Anorexia, what is this? It's just you eat or you don't, right? Just eat.
Yeah.
What's the problem? So I went into treatment and slowly got better. And then, I had a lot of friends online because I was very depressed and I had no real friends in real life. So everyone was online. And I started a blog called Fighting Anorexia, just to keep my friends in the US and everywhere informed of what was going on and what I was struggling with on a daily basis. It really was a very innocent thing. And it grew. People, I don't know how, found my blog. And, I was able to connect with others who were going through the same and struggling. And then I started a podcast. And from there, I started blogging more seriously. And I started podcasting more seriously. Yeah. And trained to be a coach. And then, here I am. I've been doing the coaching for 5 years now, on and off. I had a son in between, but I've been, in this quote unquote business for the last 5 years and have been working with women who are not, I don't work with women who have an eating disorder because I'm not a therapist. And I work with women who are just dieting all the time, right? Who are yo-yo dieting and who just feel like the body is wrong. My body is so wrong. I need to change it. And diets will help and fix me. But diets don't work, so I always need a new diet, right? And I gain the weight and I lose the weight. There's so much shame and so much fear and guilt. So it really, it was very organic. I never planned to be a coach. I had no idea what a coach was. And I just fell in love with this work, really. And quite honestly, very selfishly, back at the beginning, when I did the podcast, just sharing, okay, this is the progress that I'm making, this is what I'm learning, helped me be accountable, right? And sharing that with others and knowing that there are actually people listening and they felt like this was valuable advice made me walk my talk. So really it was a way for me to heal a little bit more and a little bit deeper and maybe a little bit faster than I would have if I had stayed isolated and stayed, just struggling by myself in a way.
And I've heard, I think it was Katie Dalbert or someone else commenting that when they first started podcasting, they got into it to help themselves and they saw it as a free way to get expert advice. So they would invite people on, they'd get to chat with them for an hour, get lots of nuggets of information that they could then use themselves. Was that part of your approach as well?
Yeah, for sure, right? You do that, and it's so interesting when you have a podcast. You get all kinds of people, right? You can interview because, especially 5 years ago or so, podcasts were still pretty new. Yeah, now everyone has a podcast, but back then it was still something really, really cool. It still is, but back then it was a little bit cooler. Yeah. So yeah, I did that, and I don't listen to these interviews because I was so nervous all the time. I was like, oh my God, Yeah. And still today, when I interview people I just look up to so much, and who have helped me heal so much, it's just an honor to talk with them. And it's totally selfish. Really, you do it for yourself. But knowing that it helps you, right, it's kind of like, okay, there are other people out there. They probably benefit from it too. Yeah,
definitely. It's not totally selfish. It is then helping other people. I listened to Tim Ferriss's podcast a lot, and he talked about the same, that he got in these situations where he'd be having these amazing conversations with all these different business leaders and stuff, and he was like, I should record this. Other people can really benefit from this stuff.
Yeah.
So going back to when you were 10 and you went on that first diet, was like, was weight or like body image stuff like a real issue for you back then and for all through your childhood, or was there stuff that kind of kicked that off?
So my parents always tell me that I always had a weird relationship with food.
Okay.
Whenever we were on vacation and we would have a late breakfast, I was the one who an hour or 2 hours later was like, I'm starving, we need to go home. Whenever we were at the beach, we had to go home and I had to eat, and I was like really going crazy. So I kind of was on the schedule in a way back then already. I had always been very conscious of my body, but at the same time, I had a very abusive brother who was playing all kinds of weird games with me and mental games, right? And,
right.
And then when I was 10, it just really got too much. Like, I was a chubby child. I was. But him continuously saying, really, really, really horrible things to me about my weight, about myself in general, just was like, okay, I'm going to prove him wrong, right? I'm going to just lose all the weight and I'm going to look so great. And everyone around me will be proud of me and will see me. And, for the first time, I won't be my brother's victim or my brother's kind of like punching ball, right? Yeah. I'll be someone. I'll be the thin girl. So that's when I started. And I was always very determined. So for me, actually, dieting was not a real big thing. I was just like, okay, I'm going to only eat breakfast and lunch. That's it. And that's what I did. But yeah, I think why I dieted and started to diet at this point was because I had two adults in my life tell me that I was chubby at that point. And that was like the real trigger for me. They were, very probably unconscious and not in a bit meant to be hurtful comments, but they really hurt me right at this point. And
I guess if you were already sort of very vulnerable to that stuff anyway, because your brother had sort of stoked that fire, that was then just internalized much more than for, say, someone else who'd received a similar offhand comment and they had forgotten about it the next day.
Exactly. And, back then, I don't think it was like, I don't had any role models. There was no Britney Spears at that time just yet or someone like that, right? Where it was like, I want to be so thin, or I never wanted to be a model or, just be thin in order to be famous. That came later, quite honestly. That came later. But at this point, it really was just this shame of having this body that obviously must be wrong when everyone's talking about it, right? Or everyone to me were those two people and my brother. But really it was like, all right, let's change it. And I'm going to diet. Right.
And what about your parents and them as role models around food and also around like body image stuff?
That's a very interesting question. We are a family of eaters. We like to eat. And at the same time, we like to eat. There were always diets, right? It was food and weight was always an issue, always. My mom was always on a diet. My aunts were always on diets. Even my grandma was talking about weight and I have to lose weight. I have to lose weight. And my mom, every time we went out to eat, she then said to the waitress, when we were paying, like, tomorrow we're not going to eat anything. And it was just one of her things, right? Like, but I took it to heart. I was like, okay, if my mom is not allowed to eat anything tomorrow and she's not going to eat anything, and she's like 30 years older than I am, then I cannot eat anything tomorrow because I'm supposed to be younger and more pretty and all these things. So, these things really, I took them to heart. My sister didn't, you know, it's just my character. So we, as a family, we were always eating, but we were always on a diet or talking about diets or counting calories. Like my brother counted calories and then my sister was on diets and my dad was just talking about diets. He never was on a diet, but he was talking about, I should do this. And so it was always, always, always there. And to this day, my aunt, right, who's like the biggest one of those people I talk about, and she knows it, so I'm allowed to talk about it because she knows her struggle, right? She just goes up and down and up and down and still searches for this miracle cure that's gonna save her and heal her. She's still on diet, so it is a big thing. And I was weighing myself every morning. My mom was weighing herself every morning, so it was definitely a huge issue in our family.
And so, I mean, you said at the beginning that you suffered with this for 14 years. And for so many people who get like an eating disorder, especially something like anorexia at such a young age, like a lot of those people don't come out the other side. So was there like a piece of advice, or there a specific situation or an incident or like something that you learned that set off like a light bulb, like that has helped you get to where you are today? And it might be there's multiple things, so you don't have to just say one. But yeah, I'd just be really interested to see like what is the thing that you really identify that has helped you make that change?
Yeah. So there was, when I was 16, I was in the US for 6 months, went to high school there, and I came back home and I was really, really thin at this point. And so, I came home and I was like, I need help. And my parents looked for a clinic and I went there and it was awful. So even though, at this point I wanted help and I went along with it, after 4 days I was like, I'm done. I can't do this. So I wasn't ready and went back and just had the same, stuff for 8 more years.
Yeah.
And then what really got to me was first, knowing that my husband cannot save me, and instead it just got worse. So that was one of the things, like, I have to save myself. And then it really just got to this point where I was so weak and I was exercising so much and eating so little that I physically couldn't continue. And I remember one day, it was in late fall, maybe October, November, probably November.
Yeah.
I was going to the gym and I was so weak arriving at the gym, but then I had to work out and I was like trembling and I physically, literally, I couldn't, but I forced myself, right, to work out. And when I came home that night, I was like, I cannot do this anymore. I don't want to do it anymore. And also I can't physically. So that was the first point for me to say, okay, something's got to change. And at the same time, I read Portia de Rossi's book, Unbearable Lightness, which for me, I think this was the first or the second book I read on someone who was struggling with anorexia and binge eating and bulimia, right? So similar things. And she got out, and she got help, right? And she healed. So I think that allowed me to see for the first time that, first of all, I was not alone.
Yeah.
And there's hope, right? There's help. There's the other side. So these were the things. And then obviously, I mean, it wasn't a pretty journey. I didn't, admit myself and go into treatment, and 3 months later I was healed. So there was these little things. And for me, the one thing that kept me going, and it sounds really cheesy, but I wanted a child like this.
Right.
I wanted to be a mom at some point in my life. And, what I was doing to my body was ruining my chances of ever having a child. So I think that kept me going. And those were the moments when I was, I didn't want to do it, and I didn't want to not exercise and all these things. I was like, yeah, but one day I want to be a mom. So I'm going to deal with my fears, right? And going to deal with my issues.
Yeah. And I know, like, the good news of this is that you are now a mom, and I think you have a child who's like around about like 2 years, somewhere around there. Am I correct?
Yes, he just turned 2 a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, I got pregnant, very surprisingly, because doctors told me, you can't, right? You've ruined your body, and I had ruined my body. So for years I was told, you just, forget about it, basically. And I did. I really was like, okay, well, this is it, right? This is my punishment or the consequences. But I got pregnant, and it's been so healing. I mean, I was already healthy at this point when I got pregnant, but the whole pregnancy thing, which changes your body so much, right? And then after giving birth, your body changes again. So this has been not a challenge for me. It's been really healing more and more. And just knowing that, my body is growing alive and that I have this capacity made me proud and made me really in awe of my body. And, my body's changed. I don't look the way I looked 2 years ago or 3. But I'm okay with it. I really am okay. And this is surprising for me, right? With the entire history. But I don't yearn for the body I had. I don't think, back then everything was better. And I really learned to I used my tools, right? I used the tools I learned during recovery, because I know many women struggle with this. But for me, it was just like, yep, this is part of life. This is part of being a woman. This is part of my journey, my life. So totally cool with having this crazy child and a body that's different, right?
And it's quite interesting you say all that, because I've worked with a number of clients who've come to me because they're wanting or they're struggling with disordered eating. And through some point in the process of us working together, they become pregnant. And what typically happens is it makes their journey easier. And there are going to be exceptions to this, and there will be people who really struggle with it. But the majority of the time when I've been working with clients, or every time that I've worked with clients where this situation has come up, it's almost like there's this shift of, this is now no longer just about me. Like, this is about something else and something much more important. But there's also a different light in which they then view their body. So before it was like this ornament, this thing to like mold aesthetically. And now it's like, no, this is like really wonderful and very, like, I've got to think of this from a functional perspective. And there's so many things that my body can now do. And you get this new appreciation for what the body can do as opposed to what it should look like. And that it is quite amazing. It's almost like this switch goes off. And look, I'm not suggesting that anyone who's dealing with disordered eating or eating disorder just go out and get pregnant. Like, that is not the solution. And people are in these situations, they've been working on this stuff for a while, but there is something pretty amazing about that.
Absolutely. It is. And it is, I mean, it is a miracle, right? It is kind of like I'm growing a child.
Yeah.
Like, how is this possible? There's a human being inside of me. But really, you know, you learn to accept and just allow, right? And what you said is absolutely correct. It's not, the body is not an ornament anymore. It is not something I have to change and shape, and, you know, it's not my only worth in a way. Now it is my body, and I love my body, but it's also just something that functions, right? It's something natural. This is really connected to nature. This is something that women have been doing for many, 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 many years. So I think for me that, yeah, it is, you step away from being so centered on your own, you know, on yourself. And it's like, okay, now there's someone else, right? And it's the two of us. So let's take care of this.
Yeah. And look, one of the big things that I always say to clients, and from reading your blog and listening to your podcast, you say the same, which is disordered eating and eating disorders like aren't really about the food. And I would love you to kind of explain that from either your perspective or the perspective that you've got through working with clients, so that people can understand what this really means.
Yeah. So, you know, it's different for everyone, but so the general theme is the shame and the fear and the guilt, right? It's like, I'm ashamed of who I am. I fear that nobody's going to love me. And I'm guilty for eating all the time, right? But it's not, for me, definitely, I was ashamed for who I was because my brother told me that I was not good enough. I was not worthwhile. I was not worthy and all these things. So I was ashamed. I was guilty of taking up space and being in this life, actually, you know, being here. And I was so scared of him, and I was scared of myself, and I was just like I was scared of life. I was scared of, you know, uncertainty around me. So food gave me a lot of certainty. Yeah. And not eating and dieting and over-exercising, that gave me, I was able to count calories. I was able to calculate my BMI 15 times a day. I was able to, you know, really add my calories over and over and over again. It gave me something to do. It was predictable, more or less. And I was able to say, okay, I've eaten so much today, and I'm going to have to exercise so many hours to get rid of my food. You know, so this really gave me something to do, and obsessing over my body and the way it looked gave me something to think about or worry about. Now, yeah. Obviously, I didn't think that, right? I didn't say, all right, let me develop an eating disorder to stop being so scared of life and my brother. But it just happened, right? I used it. I found it really effective. I got a lot of, like I said, you know, people telling me I was doing so great and I looked so great. And so it became about something much, 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 much bigger than just me not eating or eating. And I actually always liked the food, right? I actually always liked to eat, but it just didn't allow myself to, because I was going to get fat, and fat meant for me everything was unpredictable, right? And I was going to be loved even less. and people would hate on me and all these things. So, for a few of my clients, it's really about staying small too. I have one of my favorite clients. She always knew that the life she lived, she had, she's 3 boys, they're grown up now, and she always felt like, okay, I had bigger dreams and bigger plans for my life. I was a great mom, but now it's like, it's time for me to do something else. But she kept herself small by focusing on her weight and focusing on, just getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And she was never right. And then she gained the weight back and it was not right, again. And then she tried something else. So her world was just really small. It was just focused on her body and the food. And the moment she stopped focusing on that so much and she stopped giving weight and food so much power, she began to do all kinds of great things, right? She's on a trip to Italy right now, actually. And just really expanding her life and doing what was always inside her and what she always knew, but she was just scared, right, of stepping out of her comfort zone. So food was like, okay, was her tool to stay small and to stay with what she's known for many, many, many years. And so we all have our own reasons, fears that we want to cover with food, but it's really never about, I don't like food, right? Or I don't know, I'm scared of the food. That's not that. It may start this way, like, okay, let me lose weight, or let me cut out a food group or something like that because, for health reasons. But in the end, it's about really something way, way, way bigger.
Yeah. And I think what you said there makes me think of that idea of like, if I have this disordered eating, if I have this stuff going on and I try and I fail, well, I've always got this as an excuse.
Oh, yeah.
But if I don't have this and I try and I fail, like, what do I have now? What do I fall back on? And so despite the fact that over the long term it causes way more pain, in those short-term moments where people are keeping up on a day-to-day basis, it helps them have the illusion of, I'm in more control, this is protecting me. Exactly. And it's exactly what you said. For me, it really, that was what it was all about. So even if I would never have a good job, or I would never be able to be better than my brother, or to be more loved than my brother, or anything like that, I would still be thin. Right? I would be thin, and being thin was like, this was my big accomplishment. This was me, right? I was the thin one. Yeah. I was the odd one out in our family, and I was not happy. I was not the one who smiled all the time. I wasn't the funny one, but I was thin. So, and that gives you a lot of power, right? And so for me, that was my distraction, right? For others, it's up and down and up and down, but for me, definitely it was this. It is a power. It is like a superpower to be thin. Quite honestly, it is. And when you believe in it, right? Mm. So it was like, no matter, I didn't finish college. I dropped out of school and then, went back. But it was like, I had a lot of crap happen and I was still thin. So it was like, it didn't really matter because, I had that going for me. And what if I now start to gain weight and I start to look healthy or look normal, and I will still be the one who didn't finish college and really didn't have anything good going on. So what if, right? And who am I if I'm not thin? Then where do I get my worth and my worthiness from? So that was a big fear. And I think that is one of the biggest ones, right? So when you spend your life living for weight loss or food, either way, then it's really scary to let go of this and figure out, who am I actually? What can I do? What am I capable of in a way? And how can I put this puzzle that I am back together without having the food and the weight component in all of this? And that's the one thing that we often don't, we don't want to do this, right? We want to we don't want to change and question everything. But that, I think, and I know it is one of the steps one has to take in order to get out of, this whole mess that we're in. Yeah. And look, there's a couple of things you mentioned there that I want to comment on. Like, the first is in regards to the thinness. It's then so encouraged as part of our society. And as you said, like people were saying, congratulations, like you must have such good willpower. And people get patted on the back for going down a very unhealthy path where it's not about health, it's about something totally different. And then the other thing is just in terms of losing your identity, like this becomes all consuming. And I think when clients start to get over that, it frees up a whole heap of time, which is a double-edged sword, because in the beginning, it's like, what do I do with all this time? I don't know what to do. I don't know what my interests are. Like that in of itself is pretty anxiety-inducing. And it's only after the long haul, as people have gone through it and they've discovered, like, who am I? Like, what do I like doing? That it's then that moment of like, wow, I've got all this time back. But in the beginning, it's almost like, I don't want this.
Exactly, because I don't want to know who I am actually. And yes, this is the one thing we struggle with. It's like, I don't have any interests, right? I don't have anything. I don't know. I don't have any hobbies. I don't have anything other than this food thing. And this is what my clients too often feel.
Yeah.
And then it just, you have to experiment and to see. But I know that for myself, I had that too. And so what I did at the beginning, I just watched a whole lot of TV. I watched, Mad Men, and I watched Dexter, and I watched, all these shows, and I just watched, one episode after the other to occupy myself. Yeah. And I do like American TV. So, it was one of these things, but I needed something other than my eating disorder to focus on. So for me, it was the TV stuff. And then slowly I figured out that writing is one of my things, right? And I love writing, and I did that before I had my eating disorder. And I just, found my creativity again, and all these things, they happened because I stopped focusing on my food and on my weight. But it is this emptiness in between, like you just said, right? So now I'm supposed to not do all these behaviors that I've been doing for so long, and I don't know who I am and what I actually like and what I want, what are my interests, what am I doing with my time? And that's the scary, like this whole, where you feel like everything's falling apart, and I myself don't know who I am, and I am falling apart. And, I think sometimes we have to really reframe this and look at it in a way of saying, you get to see and find yourself for the very first time in a very long time, right? So It's almost like you're really starting from scratch, and you get to build this new you in a way, but it's super scary.
Yeah. And I think you've just removed the best tool you know of how to deal with your anxiety and how to distract yourself. And it's like, now what? And I know from having a look on your site and from one of your podcasts, like you're quite into meditation. Like, did that come about as part of that process, or did that start earlier? Like, how did you get into it, and what's your practice look like?
I was not into meditation at all. I was brought up very, very scientific, right? Very practical. So meditation, what's that, right? We don't need that. So no, I was not spiritual at all. I was not, I always was like laughed at these things. And then I, started to heal, and I started to do all these practices and mindfulness, right? These things. And, I just read more and more and more. And I really figured out that meditation helped me so much, to just calm down and calm that anxiety, and, also I think see myself and find myself again, because it was like I was able to really get into my center. And I used to have a really great meditation practice. Like really, I woke up very early in the morning. I would meditate for 20 to 30 minutes, and I would, do different meditations. Sometimes I would listen to meditations, and sometimes I would just sit and breathe. Yeah. But I often visualized my ideal life and what I wanted, and, my body, what I wanted for my body, and all these things. And often I really thought, what are my fears? And, let me work on these. I had I followed a great podcast that had all these, I forget the name. I think it was just called the Meditation Podcast, but they have really, really cool meditations. So I used a lot of those, and it really it helped me to let go of a lot of fears. And again, it helped me, the visualization helped me to see where do I want to go, right? And that often helped me to just get over the day-to-day stuff, the fears that do come up naturally and that happen, almost subconsciously, right? Whenever you do something that you normally do and where you would normally go and restrict. So I really slowly just went down this path, and it just helped me so much. And I sometimes was like, who am I? I don't believe in this, right? I don't believe in these things. I don't think this is something you do, and this is just weird. But I did it, and it helped. So I was like, there's something about it, and I don't care if my parents think I'm weird, right? My family thinks I'm weird, and it doesn't really matter. So now I have to say my meditation practice is almost gone because
the 2-year-old, I would imagine, is the reason for that. Yes.
Yes, just a little bit. So if I meditate like once a month, that's a win. I get up in the morning and I journal. So that's my thing. That has been, I just had to say, okay, what's my priority? So journaling for me, even if it's just 3 minutes a morning, that's my thing right now. But I miss it. I have to say I miss the meditation because it changed my life. And I know that, should I ever make it a priority again, it will change my life again in more profound ways, probably. But it just, for some inexplicable reason, for me, just sitting down in the morning, being still, gave me a lot of courage to then, even beyond my eating disorder, beyond food, it helped me to really take charge of my life and take my power back. So that's why I recorded a meditation album, right? That's why I did all of that, because it just helped me so much. And I was like, okay, so it probably helps others too.
Yeah. And look, I think if you're coming from it from the scientific side, there's now a lot of research into how useful meditation is. So even if there isn't the explanation of this is because of this brain chemical or that or whatever, from a practical perspective, if people do it for 5 days, 10 days, however long, they start to notice these changes, and that is pretty consistent across the board.
Yeah,
so, I think there is a lot of scientific literature that's backing up the support of meditation, and it's something I am terrible at meditation. I don't think I've ever really got into meditation, but I spend an hour going for a walk in like the forest every morning with my dog. So that's my meditation. But I do encourage it with lots of clients, especially when I'm working with clients around disordered eating and body image. And I think a lot of the time when trying to get out of this stuff, anxiety naturally starts to surface, and meditation just seems to take the edge off that. It doesn't take it away for most people, or not to start with, but at least just makes it more manageable. And you can start, if you're doing it at the beginning of the day, there's just that more calmness to start the day, as opposed to like already starting with anxiety at a 10.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's true. But still, I was very just refusing to see all this. I know there's a lot of scientific data right now, which is great. And, there's probably more and more and more coming out. And now I see it, right? But back then I was like, that's, it's not true. Anyway, but it works, right? So who cares?
Yeah.
Anyway.
And so I know you've traveled a lot. You mentioned that you lived in the US at some point, I think when in your high school, but I think you then moved to New York at another time. Like where are some of the different places you've lived throughout your life?
Yeah, I lived in South Carolina. I went to high school in South Carolina and then went back to go there, to go to college for a few months before my eating disorder kicked in, more than before. And then I lived in Zurich, Switzerland, and, obviously Germany. And then I lived in New York for 6 months, which was so great. And I couldn't get a visa at this point, so I probably would have stayed there if I could have. But now I'm back in Germany.
Okay.
Pretty close to where I grew up. So, yeah.
Right. Because I know, again, working with lots of clients with disordered eating, often there's this sense of like, I want to go traveling, and it's this idea of like, it's going to be new. It's going to be a new start. It's going to be new, like in this new place, things are going to be different. It will be easier. Like, was there a little bit of that with some of the impetus to travel and move around?
Yeah, 100% every time. I wanted to go to high school because I wanted to get away from my brother. So it was like, okay, I'm just gonna move. Again, everything's gonna be better.
Yeah.
And I came back home, way skinnier than I actually went there. So yeah, that worked. And then I went back to college for the same reason. I just want to get away from my family, from everyone. And I think I was there for 3 months, and this was one of my low points, right? So didn't work. And so, yeah, I was trying to run away from my problems. I was trying to run away from myself. But this didn't work. It didn't work for some reason. Yeah. And so every time I came back home, I was sicker than before. And, it's just like, yeah, it is exciting. And, it was exciting for me to move by myself when I went to college there. Had my own house with my, housemate and my roommate, but it was like a house, and I was 20 or something like that. It was super exciting and super great, and I had my own car, and I was, in this cool country. But it didn't change the fact that I was insecure and unhappy and scared and just messed up, right, at this point. And so I never really went to college. I just went to the gym all the time. And so my behaviors really got stronger and stronger whenever I was not around my parents still kind of had an eye on me, right? And my mom cooked, so at least, something was there for me to eat at the times. And when I was alone, I didn't really eat, right? So it was like, why bother? And yeah, so it didn't work. And I think when I moved to New York, my marriage was really bad at this point. So it was another way of me saying, all right, I'm going to just, go. I'm going to escape. And it didn't work either. It was just like, you can't outrun yourself, and you can't outrun situations in your life that may be messy and that may be hurtful and painful. You have to actually confront them. And I was constantly running away from myself. And the moment when I said, all right, I have to really take control and take my power back, that is when my eating disorder went away. That is when, like, for good, I haven't had setbacks since then. And when I really also, financially, things got better, and I just was more confident and more in myself and in this life. Whereas before, when I always ran away, I was not a functioning grown-up. I was not a grown-up at all. I was still a little child, right? Yeah. And whenever something went wrong, I would run back home to my parents and say, save me. So it's not working. There are many different reasons to move, but if you want to move because it's exciting and it's new and you think it's going to help you with releasing whatever fears and whatever behaviors you have, chances are it's not going to. Yeah. I think. In my experience.
Okay. And so you've now certified, is it with the Institute for Psychology of Eating?
Yes.
When did you study there? Like, how did you find that course?
Oh, how did I find that? Probably through friends, when you begin to do this work and you meet all these great people. And Emily and David have been around, the kind of the director and founder of the Institute, are doing such great work, and I probably just stumbled on them at some point. And I had, at the point when I began to, do the certification program, I already was a Martha Beck life coach, certified Martha Beck life coach, and I really wanted to just get more skills around the food and body. I had my own experience, right? And I knew what helped me, but I really wanted to just broaden my spectrum of tools that I had and how I could help my clients more. So let me just think. It was 2 years ago that I began the program.
Okay.
1.5 years ago. It's been so great. I learned so much. It's such an incredible program. And I met so many people, but for the first few months, I was like, yeah, I know all of this already, right? So whatever they were teaching, I was like, yes, this is what I teach too. And it was really great for me to be confirmed in that what I intuitively kind of knew was, scientifically was backed up too. And then I learned so much more, like incredible things. And I use them all the time, actually. And it's just been a whole kind of dimension when it comes to looking at food and body image issues and weight issues. So, I was certified a year ago, and it definitely has changed my practice, and it has changed my relationship with myself even more, right? So you always learn more for yourself when you take these programs and you really do the exercises and do the things, right? It's not just listening and saying yes, 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 but you actually have to implement in a way.
And it's really interesting that you say what you did about the fact that you wanted to go to the Institute to broaden your understanding around this stuff, because I think sometimes it can be a little bit of a trap for practitioners who've gone through their own stuff, that when they're seeing other clients, like they're always looking at it through the lens of, well, what did I go through, and assuming that the client's going through the same thing, or if not assuming, like it's still seeing it in that kind of blinkered way. So yeah, I think that's really good that you've done that. I mean, are there certain things that you've really picked up that stand out that you're like, wow, that wasn't my experience, and I wouldn't have maybe thought about that, but it's really interesting that they've now pointed that out, or I've learned that.
So one of the things that Mark David is really big on is the archetypes, right? So prince, princess, queen, king, and how we go through life, and we kind of are in different stages at different ages, and how we've learned, especially as women, to not take on the archetypes of our age in a way. So, when you're young in your 20s and you really are very me-centered and I, right? Which is great. There's nothing wrong with it. You're finding yourself. So that's the princess state. And then, as you get older, you're supposed to be more, you're supposed to grow into the more queen stage of your life, where it's like, okay, it's not just about my body and about me, but actually about how can I serve, how can I reign in a way, right? And just be great to others too, while I'm great with myself and really take care of myself. But for me, just the archetypes and have helped me to understand that, I was a total princess, right? Completely. It was just all about my body, all about me. And I really took it to the extreme where my body was my worth, right? And I was so insecure and always looked for this affirmation and confirmation from others saying that you look good, you look great, right? You're not fat. And that was one of my biggest things. And I was very, very, very thin, but I always felt fat. And so now I'm really on my way to, queendom, but I'm still a princess in some ways, which is good. We can have both sides, but also looking at, like I said before, my aunt, who is still very princess-centered, and she never learned to be the queen, which, there's nothing wrong with being the queen. Being a queen is amazing. Being like this majestic figure, and just being taking care of this world in a way, and not taking care of your body in good ways, right? It's like, all right, I love my body, I love myself, but it's not, how do I have a six-pack or not, right? This is not important anymore, and it shouldn't be important after a certain stage in life. And we actually sometimes have to get over ourselves and just say, all right, I've done this in the past, now let's see what else there is, right? For me and for my values and for the journey that I have in this life. So that was one of the biggest ahas for me. And then the feminine and masculine energies, but really the archetypes opened my eyes so much. And then you begin to see all the queens, right? And you begin to see, wow, this woman really owns her body and she looks amazing, and you can really feel her presence, and you can really see that she is herself. She embodies her body. And then it also helped me with my clients. So when I have a young woman that I mentor, I'm not trying to push her into queendom, right? I'm not saying, look at this and just be this mother of all, right? It's like, okay, allow yourself to be a little bit centered on yourself and figure out who you are and allow yourself to go all there and go all in, but to a healthy degree, right? It's not like let it take over your entire life and your entire self-worth and worthiness as a human being. And so looking back for me, obviously I let it just take over everything. So that was another healing layer for me, to just realize that and work back.
Wow. I mean, I don't know the archetypes very well. I've heard different explanations about archetypes used in different settings, but from what you described there's often a lot of clients I work with, typically like older women who have gone like the other way. So rather than being the queen where it's all about them, it's gone so far the other way where it's never about them and it's always about everyone else. So in those situations, it's like they're I don't know if a doormat is the right explanation for it, but it's like they are so low down on the rung in terms of priority and everyone else comes first. And then food becomes the thing that they use to deal with that. Sometimes it's from I'm absolutely exhausted and I'm just trying to get through. Sometimes it is more of like an emotional crutch. But yeah, I don't know if there's a particular archetype that is described as that. But yeah, I'd say that's something that I see quite commonly happening as well. Yeah,
that's absolutely true. And it's like, I think the queen, and I often think of the queen, right? It's like, all right, she takes really good care of herself, right? She's like, 90? And she's still walking without a stick, and she must take really, really good care of herself, her inner life, her health in some ways, right? And at the same time, she's taking care of her country. So it's like this, it's both, right? You do have to take care of yourself, but you have to let go of this belief that your body is supposed to look a certain way. I think that is the biggest thing, right? It's like when you're a princess, you really believe that my body should look this way in order for me to be loved. And there has to come a point in your life in order for you to stay sane, not for everyone, but most women, that you have to say, all right, my body may not look the way it looked when I was 20, and that's all right. And I don't have to compare myself to 15-year-olds when I'm 50, and that's okay. But I can still take care of myself, and I'm still allowed to take care of myself, even when I have 5 children or whatever, right? I can still take the me time, and I can still say, all right, this is just, I need this. And I'm allowed to have this without feeling guilty, without feeling like I shouldn't and I can't, and just say, I'm important too. Yeah. So, yeah, but that's a great differentiation and a great observation, because it's true. Many women just go way to the other side. And it's a balancing act, I think.
And I think from what you said there in terms of people taking care of themselves, they need to be careful in what they lump into the category of I'm taking care of myself. Because there's a lot of things that people do under the guise of that really is pushing their body, pushing their health in the other direction. And that's a lot of, again, what I work on with clients is looking at the nutrition physiology side of things when we're having that discussion of like, hey, is this genuinely healthy for you? Because I know you think it is, but there is indicators that it's not as healthy as you think it is.
Absolutely. And oftentimes, we're being so brainwashed by culture and everything that it's like, yes, it is. Yeah. But it feels awful. So whenever it feels really, really, really awful and totally against I often say the body compass, your body's wisdom and whatever, then let it go. But yeah, it's not easy to get to this place of recognizing, is this actually healthy or is it just made up, right? Yeah. Because we have all these people talking at us and we forget to really listen to ourselves and take ourselves seriously, I think, too, right? Where it's like, my opinion matters and my feelings and my thoughts and the way I experience my body and my world, this matters too. And it's not just everyone else that's right, but I could actually say, all right, I have a say in my health and in my self-care too. And a healthy, sane say, I think.
Yeah. And look, I don't want to give the impression that this is like easy and you can do it in 5 weeks or any of that. Like, it is a process. And if someone's been going through struggles with food in their body for years or decades, then it's going to take a while for that stuff to be undone. But yeah, I think just starting to have an honest look at things is obviously the first place that people need to start, like living in the real world, like the is world as opposed to the should be world.
Absolutely. And thank you for saying that. Yes, I always say be brutally honest with yourself, right, in this process. Like, don't be ashamed for whatever you think and experience, but just be really honest. Like, again, my experience when I first said I want to recover, I didn't want to recover. I just said it, and I, still did the same stuff. Had I been really honest with myself, I probably would have spared myself a lot of pain, and everyone else around me too. So just being really honest and saying, I do want this, but something really inside me is still making this harder than I thought it was going to be. Yeah. Will help you heal too. So yeah, honesty is the key.
I do. And also I think something you said earlier was like, I got to the point where I just couldn't do it anymore. And that the unfortunate reality is for a lot of people, unless you hit that place where you are basically backed up against a wall, where you cannot continue on, until people hit that, it's like, well, I'm just going to keep doing it. And it's like the pain of continuing has to become like more difficult than the pain of change. Absolutely. And yeah, I think that's for where most people then make that transition. And at what point someone draws that line and where they see their rock bottom is, or whatever you want to say, it differs from person to person.
It does. And that is what's so sad in a way, it's so heartbreaking often. And I actually had this conversation very early on I was recovered, but my real healing. So I had a good weight, but I was still, healing inside, with a therapist. She asked me what made me do this, because she too always has this problem. She was working with many, many girls who had anorexia, that other people see how bad you're doing, but you yourself don't see it yet. And you're just like, yeah, I can still do this. I can still function. It's not that bad. Yeah, you're right. Everyone has this individual point, and you can't force someone, unfortunately, to see it, right? You can't force someone to get it. It has to start within. And for me, now when I look back at pictures, when I look back at the way I looked before I got treatment, it really shocks me. I just saw a photo of myself from, 5 years ago, the other day, and it makes me really sad, because you seriously don't see yourself the way you look. You don't. And sometimes I still don't understand it, right? I think, what was I thinking back then? Because you see yourself and you look way bigger. And now I look at this girl, and she is so scarily thin and so emaciated, right? But I did not see that. I still saw fat, and I still saw places I had to lose more weight. And that is the scary thing about it. And when other people tell you that, oftentimes we don't hear it. We don't hear it, because it's a real illness, right? Anorexia, eating disorders, it's real, and it screws up your perception. So I wish I had an answer for that, but I don't. And I just think more awareness, right? More awareness, more speaking up, and more, there are not enough books. There's still not enough podcasts. There's still not enough things out there, resources, healing centers for girls and women and men, more and more men who are struggling with real, horribly scary eating disorders. So the more, and even, podcasts like yours, it creates more and more and more and more awareness. And I think that helps. I mean, I know it helped me at this point in a way too.
Cool. And so, look, I could go on talking to you for hours and hours, but I want to be respectful of your time. I know you've flown a long way today, so you've had a lot of traveling. But before I let you go, where can people find out more information from you? And look, I'm going to put everything in the show notes, but if you want to just say different links for where they can find you on social media, on the web, and if you have any upcoming events or books or things you want to mention, feel free to plug it here or promote it now.
Sure. So you can find me on, my website, which is annesophie.us. That's ANNESOPHIE.us. And, I have all my links. I have the podcast. I have a podcast called Escape Diet Prison. There are the links to this podcast, and the links to Facebook and Instagram and all these things. I have a wonderful, very small, intimate Facebook group for women who are ready to stop battling food, right? Who are ready to just say, all right, I want to own my body the way it is, and I want to get my sanity back and stop feeling ashamed and guilty all the time, which is also called Escape Diet Prison. So you can just search that on Facebook. And since this podcast is coming out this week, I have a program that's coming up on July 4th, and it's called Overcoming Overeating, which is all about helping you to really figure out, why am I overeating all the time? Why do I have the binging problem, right? Why am I struggling with food? Why am I struggling with myself? Why do I feel so ashamed and guilty? And how can I heal that part? And how can I, just get, again, it's all about the sanity in the life. How can I get my sanity back? How can I get my life, myself back? It's a 2-week program, and I have 20 spots available. There's many of them are already taken. So if you want to jump in, maybe just go on to Anne-Sophie.us and write me an email and say, I want in, and would love to talk with you.
Okay, perfect. Well, I will put the links for all of that, and also for the program in the show notes. So look, Anne-Sophie, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story and your insights and everything you've been through. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I know people are going to get a lot of benefit out of it.
Thank you so much. It's been so much fun.
Thanks for listening to Real Health Radio. If you are interested in more details, you can find them at the 7 Health website. That's www.7, health.com.